Looks like I'm live already. This is just a test. I've used StreamYard years ago on my other YouTube channel, and now I am trying it with something different. I have used screen share before, so we're looking at the screen for um, what I want to do. What I want to do is use this platform not to gain subscriptions or anything special. I need it for myself. I need it to read some of my writing out loud. I'm not a professional author by any means. I am writing my first book. Actually, it's my second. The first was a memoir, and this is going to be something in a whole different realm. It is going to be more along the lines of urban fantasy, not science fiction so much, but kind of like a modern fantasy. So this is going to be my screen where I'm going to show you some of the writing out of this folder here. This is me right here, and this is the book with no title so far. Each of these folders have a series of chapters. I wouldn't call it so much chapters because some of them are only about 2 to 3 pages long. I might pause once in a while because I don't generally talk a lot, and now I'm talking. All I'm doing is talking on this live stream now. So I might stop and take a sip of water here once in a while. But this is what I'm going to do. I will be opening up different sections. And this is part of chapter 1, first section, and basically the intro to our story. I'm going to get these little tips that come in. So another thing that I will also be doing is, if I can, I'll take some pictures and share them with you. I am also illustrating the characters and the map to this book. So the pictures that I've drawn and colored myself sounds a little elementary, but it's actually very therapeutic. And to wrap up the whole main idea of this introduction is that I am writing a book for myself. It was not intended to be therapeutic, but I found it to be. I started off, I have a son who's 21 years old, and he and I would talk and have a vivid imagination of people. If people had abilities, what would it be? If we had abilities, what would we like to do? What would we do with them? What if we were sucked into a world because the world had things going on that could use our abilities? Things like that. And many of these what ifs developed characters and ideas that I just started writing down. And then it became a plot. And then it's almost like you start to form a relationship with your own characters. I don't know how else to explain it. So here we are, the Tamian Forest of Catal. I am going to see if I can move this screen over, because what I cannot do is I cannot see the StreamYard screen where the chat might be. And I don't know if anybody might have questions or whatnot. I don't expect many of my live streams to go have many visitors, but like I said, this is for myself, and for some reason I cannot. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize the StreamYard screen, open up the screen so you can see the writing. It starts in the Tamian Forest of Catal. I kind of feel like I want to show you guys the intro, the outline of the characters and places, but it's not something a reader would have if they like read the book. So let's just read it as if you were reading a book. The Raven tribe was celebrating in the open night. The people danced and passed food around liberally. Children laughed and chased each other while mothers and sisters sat in circles and gossiped. The Tamian tribes had 12 territories, and Maluhia was the youngest tribe leader among them all. Sometimes I misread my own writing, um, just because when I first write them all, it's different in my head, so you'll have to excuse me. And I think this is what I want to do while I'm reading this. Among them, Maluhia was the youngest tribe leader among them. I'm going to hold down shift and go up and down with the highlight as I go so I don't lose my place. All Tamian people wore warm cotton and fur regalia with minimal jewelry. Some women wore their hair up to represent status and motherhood, while men pinned adornments to represent accomplishments such as feathers and tusks. The Tamian territories in Catal encompass three distinct landscapes: the mountains in the north, the forests between the Great River north and south, and the grasslands that surrounded the eastern and southern areas of the forests. The mountain tribes wore blue among their furs and clothes, while the forest tribes used greens, and the grassland tribes preferred browns. Each tribe was named after a tribal animal. Tonight, the Raven people were celebrating a plentiful harvest this year, and the flocks were fat and in abundance. So they would have plenty to trade, which brought on so much excitement. Maluhia inhaled aromas of the forest, the aromas of the feasts, and took a deep breath while gazing out over Pup Lake. Things were good, but his mind was not at peace. His thoughts lingered on the dreams he had lately. Images of war invaded his rest. He never had the abilities of a seer, so during the first 3 days, he dismissed them. But in the 5 days after that, the images became more disturbing and painful to look at. He dreamed about his people running in fear, women brutalized, and children battered. His mind's eye saw attacks on his fellow tribe leaders, and few slaughtered. Not just killed, but mangled and torn to pieces like an animal attack, but by hateful and barbaric looking warriors. Maluhia wanted to speak about these dreams with one of the tribe's elders, but he didn't want to worry his tribesmen. He didn't worry much about keeping this information a secret. The Tamian people were quiet and reserved. Even the Tamian language was terse, and when they spoke, they used as few words as possible. So to outsiders, it often sounded like they spoke in incomplete sentences. The Tamian people were special in this case. The Tamian people were special in the sense that they never fought wars. They were all peaceful tribes that were protected by one leader within each tribe. Tamians were cursed in a strange way. None of them wielded magic powers or had any special abilities. But when people of the tribe passed away, their souls remained with the tribe and merged with other souls of the past. All of these souls were enslaved to fight as warriors who protect their living tribe members. They are called the Makeole. The only people who can command these ghost armies are the tribe leaders. Tamians never chose their tribe leaders. The Makeole chooses the leaders. Nobody can hear the Makeole, nor can anyone speak to them. But each tribe leader could summon them when they felt threatened. The Makeole would appear armed and invincible. Then they would slaughter anyone they didn't recognize as a Tamian tribe member. The only thing that could harm the Makeole would be weapons that were hexed with a spell that can sever the soul from its bond. Shouts from the outer village guard began to rise, and the music of the celebration stopped. People hushed in concern and waited. Then a Raven tribe scout rode toward the village in urgency with another rider beside him. Maluhia climbed down from his lookout to meet them. Wolf Tribe Messenger A'ali'i. The scout addressed Maluhia in a formal language, and both disembarked their horses. Maluhia looked at the messenger and nodded as he bowed in respect. The rider was winded, his lips cracked and dry, and his clothing was disheveled and covered in dust. I'm going to reset the cursor here and go to the beginning. Wolf Tribe, you came here? No stopping? Maluhia put his hand on the boy's shoulder to steady him. He looked weak and ready to collapse. Leaders, they meet. Wolf Mountain, you leave soon, Ali'i. They say, and I've got to correct that. The boy's eyes began to flutter and as he stumbled. Is about the bad dreams. Maluhia caught the boy as he collapsed. So, to pause the reading and explain, the D's instead of THs at the beginning of words, and the accent that I'm trying to project here is Ali'i is also a Hawaiian word, so is Maluhia. I was born and raised in Hawaii, so I wanted a little bit of the influence of the Hawaiian language. If you've ever heard them speak Pidgin, that's kind of what I'm trying to reflect in their speech. But I've also kind of chopped it up because, as I indicated in a previous paragraph, their language is curt and short, so it's not going to be complete sentences. So this is going to be, I know usually in Pidgin, instead of leaders, it would be lidas. Like lidas, they meet. Wolf Mountain, you leave soon, Ali'i, they say. So these words are going to be like a little mixed, but not too, because I felt like if I kept writing it exactly the way they speak in Pidgin, like Wolf Tribe Messenger, right? I wanted to project the word messenger correctly, even though like in Pidgin it'd be like messenger. And so Wolf Tribe Messenger Ali'i, and you know the kind, and it just like it would be too hard to write out, especially somebody that is not familiar with the Pidgin language. So I try to kind of soften it a little bit so it was a little easier to understand. So leaders, they meet. Wolf Mountain, you leave soon, Ali'i. They say is about the bad dreams. So every word that begins with TH during these readings, I'm trying to make sure they start with a D to give it a hard duh, day, the kind, like feeling. So I've got a dog. I've got 2 dogs and 2 cats. So sometimes they get a little curious about what I'm doing. I'm not speaking to them, and it kind of freaks them out a little bit, I think. So I have to give them a little attention sometimes if it seems like I'm stalling too. So here we go. Lidas, they meet. Wolf Mountain, we read that. He stumbles, is about the bad dreams. Maluhia caught the boy as he collapsed. Healer, now, Maluhia commanded the scout. And by now, a crowd of villagers had gathered, looking at Maluhia questioningly. Bring his horse, water it, feed it, he called out. Ali'i, a teenage boy, approached as Maluhia handed the messenger's limp body to a man who carried him away. Will you go tonight? He asked. Maluhia thought on this for a moment, and his stomach clenched. He hated leaving his villagers without the Makeole army to protect them. He thought he could take most of the village with him, since there were only 2 weeks away from the traders' exodus. Taking thousands of people would be slow. It could take weeks to get there. Maluhia wondered if any of the other tribes would be making their traders' exodus at all. Many of his villagers had dispersed and begun to clean up the feasting tables. The messenger's arrival shook people, so they decided to stop celebrating. The Raven tribe loved young Maluhia and feared for his departure. 5 men approached Maluhia armed with bows, blades, and spears. They looked at him silently as if waiting. Raven tribesmen were not warriors, but all Tamian people were hunters for food, leather, or furs, but none of the families hunted in excess. Maluhia looked for the Raven tribe scout and called his attention. "Get my horse ready, hurry," Maluhia said, and the boy hurried away. "Who you take, Malu?" one of the armed men asked in a serious tone. "Nobody. I go alone," Maluhia answered gently, placing his hand on his friend's shoulder. The 5 men grew up with him. They were his most loyal friends, and the 6 of them hunted together for years. But Maluhia could tell they were not preparing to go hunting. "Malu, we not Makeole army. You don't command us. We all go, or we gonna chase you anyway." A tall man said this. And his friends all nodded in agreement. They were all thick with dark skin like Maluhia. A couple of his friends had longer hair, and hair that they wrapped in a bun on top of their heads. All of them hung a raven's feather on their preferred weapons. They had all earned their feathers together when they turned 16 by hunting a stag down and bringing it back to the village celebration. Bringing it back for a village celebration. To side note, I did use Grammarly to help edit a lot of the grammar. And like I said, in my head, I have a different phrase in mind, but I guess the Grammarly kind of puts a proper phrase and words it better than I would think of it. So sometimes I'm a little surprised at my own writing. To finish, Maluhia smiled sadly. His friend was right. Nobody in the village was a soldier. Although he was a tribe leader, he could only enforce tribal laws, but he couldn't tell his people what to do. Being a tribe leader meant he served his people. People were not there to serve him, especially his friends. "Okay, keep up, brudda." Maluhia gave his buddy a light smack on the cheek, and they dispersed to collect their horses and supplies. 6 of them left within the hour. And that wraps up the first section of this first chapter. Now, just, I guess, as a benefit to watching the videos and the live streams, thanks for listening in. I'll give you some tidbits about my thoughts while I was writing this. This part here is actually very personal to me. Being a tribe leader meant he served his people. People are not there to serve him. That is a lesson I learned from my father, who was a Navy commander for 30 years in the U.S. Navy. And one of the things I always admired about him was how the young sailors, I'm going to save this while I'm talking, the young sailors seemed to just love him, and they always did things for him, even, kind of like as favors and things like that. They would always be they loved their commander. And how come I can't open this now? Anyways, so when I got a little older, maybe like 12 or 13, I remember telling my dad that it was cool that, these people in the Navy do all this stuff for him, and they were willing to just basically work for him. But that wasn't the case, really. And my dad was the one who told me that being a leader means he worked for them. They don't work for him, because it's a leader's responsibility to make sure that everybody else is doing what they're supposed to do, doing it right, doing it honest. And if they fail, it means that my dad failed. And that's his perspective on leadership, which was very interesting to me. So I am at about 20 minutes, and that includes the first few minutes of me rambling about this whole project. So my goal was to do 30 minutes each live stream, just so that it's interesting, enough content to make it interesting, but not too long to where it's boring. So This one is only 3 pages. The last one I think was also 3. Hydrate. So I'm going to read this one real quick to introduce you to the king and the queen of Vermora. So Vermora Castle in Catal. And what I'll do is I think I'll also include a post uh, with a picture of the map on this YouTube channel, so you guys can see where Vermora Castle is in reference to Tamia. And when I was talking about the locations, I felt kind of bad, like, God, I feel like I'm giving somebody directions through LA. It's just, the forests on this side and the east and southeast grasslands and the mountains. And it, I actually drew the map myself, colored it, very proud of it, and I'll post it so you can see. So let's see if we can do this in the next 10 minutes, and then we'll wrap things up. Vermora Castle, Catal. A dark-haired servant girl hurried through the halls of Vermora Castle. She searched the courtyard and found her king and queen lounging and laughing near the pond. A large blanket spread on the grass not far from the water's edge. The king lay on his side, propped up on one elbow. At the same time, his beautiful queen sat next to him, whispering little nothings into his ear. And they giggled together. King Orawn was in his late 50s. Although his hair was gray, he had a clean-shaven and youthful face. Queen Ecatena had darker hair that gleamed auburn in the bright sun. Her dark green eyes were outlined with thick lashes, and her red lips contrasted against her pink skin. As the servant girl approached, she slowed her pace and looked around cautiously. Several dogs lay carelessly nearby. One dog took notice of the servant girl but lost interest when he realized she had no food. He lay his head back down with a sigh. Relax, child. They know they're enemies, and you are not one. Come. Queen Ecatena waved her graceful hand toward the servant girl, who nodded and walked toward the couple. She bowed to each of them, then turned toward the king, but kept her eyes downcast. Your Majesty, a message from Prince Bannon. He is unable to attend dinner tonight and bids his condolences. The girl spoke crisply and clearly. What has the boy got that would keep him from dinner? King Orawn sat up in slight annoyance. He was angry, but Bannon didn't have half the study. He wasn't angry, but Bannon didn't have half the studies Orawn had when he was a youth, and the king expected some of his free time to be spent with his family. Ecatena, on the other hand, sensed something unusual about the servant girl. So, Ecatena reached out with her enchantment and searched the girl's aura. Ecatena couldn't read minds, but she had been born with a strong talent for spells. She cast her magic out and immediately recognized that the servant girl was no servant girl at all. She was not even a girl. Then Ecatena saw that it was her son, Bannon, in disguise. Bannon, the prince, had been born with an ability to change his voice completely. Some voices were original, like the girl's voice he used now, and other times he could mimic other people to sound just like them. As he grew older, Bannon was able to change his eye color. He could also manipulate his size and shape, but not drastically. As a tall, slender boy, he couldn't change his body into a chubby woman unless he wore padding. Ecatena guessed that Bannon was trying out a new disguise with a bit of help from his friend Kastari, who was gifted with ingenuity and creativity. The boys spent hours stitching together clothing and padding for Bannon's disguises, but Kastari knew how to apply makeup and masks. Ecatena was impressed at how well both boys had done with this disguise, and she didn't want to spoil it for them. Well, darling, perhaps it's a pretty girl. The queen leaned toward Orawn flirtatiously and gave him a sly grin. She lifted her hand to dismiss the servant girl as the king leaned into her invitation and kissed her warmly. He pulled away for a moment and looked dreamily into his queen's eyes. Girl, the queen called after the servant without looking away from her husband. The servant girl stopped and turned immediately. Tell the prince that his mother says she knows exactly where he is and he can keep his condolences. The queen gave a little laugh and leaned forward for another kiss. The girl looked at the queen for a moment longer, then turned to hurry away. You know where he is? Asked Orawn after his second kiss ended. Don't worry, Ecatena widened her smile. Excuse me. He's not far, and he'll be with us for dinner, she promised. The servant girl hurried down a narrow corridor in deep thought. When she was far enough out of sight from the king and the queen, she slowed her pace and thoughtfully wandered into a larger hallway. She passed large paintings and sculptures of the kingdom's past heroes, and a servant boy appeared from behind a pillar and stepped alongside her. He kept his eye on her profile while they both seemed to stroll together in leisure. So, did it pass? The boy asked and watched for her reaction. No, she knew it was me, said the servant girl, but in a man's voice. She then stopped and turned to the servant boy in disappointment. Is it a smell or the hair? Do these look real enough? Still with a man's voice, the servant girl grasped her chest, and squeezed the mounds under her blouse. In exasperation, she reached up and snatched her hair off her head. The short black hair underneath revealed her as the man in disguise. I have hiccups, guys. Sorry about that. Maybe it's your height and build. I mean, she's your mother. She could probably see you coming a mile away, Bannon. The servant boy shrugged. But with the work I put into your face, he reached up and peeled the fake skin off Bannon's forehead, removing the feminine eyebrows. You don't look remotely like yourself. You even your cheekbones are not yours. He then pulled the hair above Bannon's ear and peeled a fake cheekbone skin off. Bannon's face looked like half a man's face with partial facial hair and eyebrows on one side and a woman's lips and eyes on one rosy cheek on the other. Kastari, I may never fool my mother, but my father had no clue. Gotta get down here. If we did well enough to fool him, I think I'm ready. I think she used her enchantment and saw it was me. But if not, perhaps she'll enlighten me on what we're missing. I have to catch her alone and speak to her. Bannon pulled off the rest of the fake skin and handed the pieces to his friend. He then looked down at his bosom chest and reached into his blouse and pulled out an animal skin water pouch and gave it a light squeeze. These are brilliant, though. How did you figure out how to make them? Bannon tossed it up in the air and Kastari caught it on the way down. It made a sloshing sound. Do you know the Barfing Tavern along the south side of the river? Kastari and Bannon began walking again, while Bannon began removing the blouse and aprons from his disguise. I never go to such places. How dare you? Bannon jested with his friend. Just because you haven't gone there doesn't mean you don't know about it. Kastari took each clothing item into his arm to assist Bannon while they walked. Okay, then I'll say I've heard of the place. What about it? Bannon laughed. Well, I paid a woman, a huge woman, with very large... Kastari held the water pouch to one of his breasts and squeezed it. And she let me have a feel. Bannon laughed harder and his mouth dropped open in utter shock. You didn't! What did you pay her, you nasty mule? You're probably infected with some parasite she shared with half the river village. Bannon recoiled in playful disgust. Boy, I paid her with one whole chicken, and Kastari reached out and mockingly groped the other water bag and still strapped to his chest. She let me touch one of them for 3 whole minutes. They laughed together out loud. And when I finished, I ran outside and figured out why they call it the Barfing Tavern. Both of them roared with laughter and wheezed. A small gas caught their attention, and they stopped to receive a real servant girl standing in the doorway staring at the sight of Kastari holding on to a fake breast on Bannon's chest. She was younger than both of them and skinny. She had the build of a small boy, and she remained staring at them questioningly. Are you jealous, dear, or were you wanting to have a feel for yourself? Bannon taunted her before she ran away. Both boys laughed again and retreated to Bannon's room, where he finished removing his disguise and dressed in his riding fatigues. He and Kastari would go for a ride before returning for dinner with his parents, just as his mother had said he would. There's something I wanted to change because even I confused myself, I feel like. So there was a part where he said Bannon pulled off the rest of the fake skin handed. Then he looked down at his and pulled that out. Okay, so we have a fake boob that's getting thrown around. And what I was trying to do with this, I didn't want to make it like too sexually graphic or too inappropriate, but funny. And so I hope the verbiage that I used in referring to the tavern and the large woman was not too sexually explicit. I want this book to have clean language. It is going to talk about war, death, and killing. There's going to be like hate and jealousy, but there's also going to be love. I also didn't want it to be excessively riddled with F words and name calling. So, but there was a part where they're talking about Kastari and Bannon began walking again while Bannon began removing. Kastari took each clothing item into his hands. Okay. Then I'll say a huge woman with very large. Kastari held the water pouch to one of his breasts and squeezed it, and she let me have a feel. Okay. Bannon laughed harder and dropped. You didn't. You probably had recoiled and playful. Okay, so in this part here, Kastari is holding a water pouch to his own chest, but in my mind, I thought I wrote it to where Kastari reached up and grabbed the one that Bannon was still wearing, because Bannon only pulled one out of his blouse. And so I might need to change that or change the next part. Okay, right here, standing in the doorway, staring at the sight of Kastari holding onto a fake breast on Bannon's chest. I'm just going to take off the part on Bannon's chest because it's just easier for the image. Holding on to a fake breast. She was younger and then all that. So from there, it makes a little more sense so that the image in my head is Kastari is holding it against his own chest. And that's what the girl witnesses when she walks in. I think this is another reason why being able to read this. Oh, and I just realized I read that whole section without sharing the screen. So sorry. But you know what? I'm not going to go back and redo it because I am at 33 minutes. And that's about perfect for me. So I'm going to wrap it up. I'm sorry I didn't share the screen so you could see the writing. But perhaps this is a good trial because the first few pages I read you were able to read along. The second one, you just were able to listen. So if that helps, that's great. We'll see where it goes from here. And I will read more. I don't necessarily think I'm going to read it in order because I don't want to like give the book away and everything, but I'll try to do this as often as I can. Thanks so much for sitting in. Thanks so much for listening. I hate this phrase. I really do. But if you like where this is going and you decide to just subscribe, hit like, hit subscribe, and the notification bell. I hate the phrase. I'm not trying to sell my channel, but if you do want to follow along with me for more of the readings and the pages and the story, and perhaps give me some feedback on the verbiage, the descriptions, or whether it makes sense, or even the characters, I'm happy to hear it. And leave a comment. Thanks for joining me again, and take care.